Welcome back, everyone. And as we do, as a regular segment on the show, we are now going to tackle listener questions, but with a little bit of a twist. If you listened to the show a few weeks ago, you know that we recently hosted a live Q&A webinar, and we had a great turnout, and we got way more questions than we could address in the hour-long webinar. So we took all the leftover questions, and we're going to try to address as many as we can here on the podcast over the next month or so, I would say. And joining me to help with those questions is one of my very favorite colleagues here at College Coach, Kara Courtois. Sorry, I've known you long enough to
I know.
pronounce your,
I'm not going to do
name right,
yours, so don't worry about it.
Kara is also a former admissions officer at Barnard College. Maybe relevant to this discussion, in addition to being a college coach, Kara is also a mom, and she is sending her firstborn off to college, I think, very soon, Kara?
Very soon. Yeah,
Oh
just in
my
a couple
goodness.
weeks.
Oh my goodness. How are you doing? You feeling okay?
Yeah, she's at ROTC boot camp right now. So,
My goodness.
yeah, so I don't know. The honest
I
answer.
know. I know. I think it's
Yes.
always hard. My kids are 9 and 10, and every time I think about it,
Yeah.
like I start to choke.
Yeah.
We'll try not to make you cry on this
Thank
segment,
you.
Kara.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I am curious though, before we dig into the listener questions, how
Yeah.
has going through this process sort of been for you? You've been advising
Yeah.
families about this process for years and years and years, and now you're actually doing it
Yeah.
yourself. How's it been?
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, it makes me probably better at my job in many ways of just being able to bring that experience to it, that I'm not just speaking like out of the blue or just from my admissions experience, like it's real world. Um, but I, it is, I think the biggest challenge has been at times like to really kind of what we always encourage of families, like sort of just crowd out the noise and just focus on your child.
Yes.
Um, and you're going to get a lot of opinions, and I don't always tell people what I do for a living, so I just listen.
Mhm.
But so I feel for parents in that sense, and then I encourage, just focus on your own child. That's not selfish to do. That's just really real, because your kid is not like the kid next door, nor their best friend typically, and you're what you want to pay for college and their experience. We've gotten a lot of different feedback on my daughter doing ROTC, things like that. So
Yeah.
it's interesting overall, but it's also been awesome too. It's
Yeah.
been really, fantastic. And God, I love visiting colleges. And I knew that before, but I loved it even more with my own
Oh,
kids. It's
I
been
bet.
really fun. That part's been awesome.
Awesome. That's so great to hear, Kara. And okay, I'm just going to now bombard you with questions not about you now, from
Yep.
our
Great.
listeners.
Yep.
And the first one that came in is the college admissions process of evaluating candidates manual or automated? And do you foresee AI changing this process in the future?
Yeah. I mean, we always talk about holistic review when it comes to applications, so that's definitely human,
Mhm.
process. And so, as it stands right now, it seems like the only way AI, and this can be super helpful, would be, transcript evaluation and trying to speed up that process that most admissions counselors would be say, yes, to be able to streamline that a little bit,
Yeah,
as far as test scores, those kinds of things. But
yeah,
otherwise, schools certainly that are holistic, and that's the majority of schools, are going to, try to retain that aspect. And that's kind of what I know for now. I think that
yes.
process will potentially have a lot more changes at the end of this year. We'll see.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's a little bit, we can't imagine all the ways that AI might be
Yeah,
affecting our lives in years to come.
100%.
Totally. So the next question, and I guess also relevant to this conversation, you're not only worked in college admissions and you're a mom, you're
Mhm.
also a former teacher.
Yep.
So I think you may have experienced this topic from both sides of the desk. But the question is, what is more important when seeking teacher recommendations? Asking a teacher who is extremely enthusiastic about your student,
Mhm.
or asking a teacher who teaches in the student's planned major? Great question.
Yeah. I a lot of times it really doesn't work out that the major the student wants happens to be a class that they really connected with the teacher or really had opportunities to shine
Mhm.
necessarily. When it does, great. That seems like a natural inclination to be able to speak in the area of the subject they think they want to study. But I would say, in the grand scheme of things, following the student's instincts of which teacher they connected with the most or showed up most brightly in the class, contributed a little bit more, um, maybe had just times when the teacher really kind of commented on either in written evaluation or in the classroom, trying to connect with that teacher. So I would err on the one where the teacher will have something beyond a standard, kind of generic response and have kind of a personal, connection. Which
Totally.
oftentimes the only thing to add there too is sometimes students can be really surprised that it's the class where they struggled the most, that maybe they were going for extra help. I do encourage students, you know, don't go for the easy A, perhaps that's
Yes.
not always the most thoughtful rec, but which teachers saw you grow from maybe having to get extra help or struggle a little bit and try harder and grow as the year went on.
Yes.
So
Oh, that's such a good point. Because, yeah, I think it would be the natural inclination for students. As the teacher of the class I did the best in. And
totally.
you showed up on day one and just sort of knew everything, no particular struggles or growth.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot they can say. Yeah, they were a good student. It's sort of a boring
Yeah.
recommendation, right? But if they witnessed your path of growth over the course of the semester or the year, that can end up being a great recommendation.
Yeah, and
Good.
and students are a little bit fearful they're gonna get turned down, by teachers. I think that's
Yes.
one of the biggest
Yeah.
things. So I would say on average, like 2 a year when I was teaching, where I would say to students, like, I actually don't know that I would write a particularly personal one because I know you either outside the classroom,
Mhm.
which maybe isn't, as helpful if it's a teacher recommendation.
Right.
So I encourage students, if the teacher turns them down, that's actually a good thing. Guaranteed there's,
Right.
one or two teachers that they can find. And if not, guess what? Go to office hours, make
Yes.
a point, and I say that to students all the time. Going into September of senior year and you're nervous about that part because teachers don't know you, you've got time. Go
Mhm.
really make a point of helping that teacher get to know you.
Such a great tip, and probably a good tip for underclassmen to just have this
Yes.
in the back of their minds, like, get to know your teachers, let them get to know you.
Good goal for
Um,
junior year. Who are
yes,
2 teachers I'm going to help get to know me? And so in May, it won't be so uncomfortable asking for recommendations at the end of junior year.
love it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Next question. What is the best way to show your interest to a college for a potential major?
Mm, yeah. I mean, to be honest, some schools don't care, really on their
Yeah,
application.
yeah.
If they're just asking, tell us what major you think you want, then it's usually, especially larger state universities, they're just trying to put you into a college within the larger university. And so they're just, looking for a curriculum that,
Mhm,
make sure that you're prepared for that. Schools that really lean towards caring a little bit more or sort of taking that into account would usually put it on the supplement
mhm,
question, in which case that's a great space to really dig in and do some school specific research,
mhm.
on their website. If you're
Yeah,
applying for, biomed engineering, go to the biomed engineering, part of that school's website and lean into not just why you want biomed engineering anywhere, but at that school.
yes,
What kind of materials, lab, research are they doing? Hands-on opportunities that you can point to that make sense, that
totally.
maybe tie to what you've done in high school.
That's
So I'd say
great.
that's probably the number one. Yeah.
That's perfect. And as I'm thinking about, I think I've heard from you and our colleagues on the
Mhm.
admissions side of the house, the fact that the whole sort of application should make sense and tell a story as a whole.
Mhm.
And it might be, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the impression I have, Kara,
Mhm.
a little weird if you
Mhm.
are applying to an engineering program, say, and all your you didn't have great grades in math and science,
Yes.
and your activities were poetry club and school
Yeah.
newspaper, and there was some disjointedness
Yes.
there, that preferably the whole application is sort of telling this cohesive story about you. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think engineering is a good example of where it's a little more specific, and you
Yeah.
look at their curriculum requirements, definitely,
Yeah.
like it's hard to make a case for a more selective major like engineering if
Yes.
you haven't done as well in the STEM classes,
Totally.
and don't hit their requirements that they list on their website. But for a lot of, students, they're pretty undecided, and the
Yeah.
college knows that.
Yes.
So I hope students have a curriculum that really yes, speaks to their strengths, but also, leaves them just with a strong curriculum in general.
Yes.
Which, cheat sheet on that is 4 years in all the core English, math, history, science, language other than English, um, is the simpler way of looking at that.
Yes.
And they're prepared for kind of anything, overall.
Yeah, that's great. Makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
The next question, what are the essential activities or checklists that a rising senior, and actually, I think we can probably go through the class years, but let's start with a rising senior. What are
Mhm.
the essential activities that a senior must do the summer before senior year? So are we like halfway through the summer already? I don't
Yeah.
know how that happened, but what should our seniors be doing
Yeah.
right now to prep for college applications?
Yeah. There's a lot. So, Um, I mean, I think right now for students, if they aren't sure any schools they want to apply to, get on
Yeah.
that. So, if they think they're, going that path, and there's plenty of options, but for sure, and families always say, should I visit in the summertime? I say visit whenever you can, because you can always go back. So, summer's a blank slate and you have a little more wiggle room as a family, as we often do as working parents. Did plenty of college visits in the summer and got tons of, have gotten tons of value out of it. So researching, on the school websites, there's virtual tours almost everywhere. So, as part of the research, if you can't get to places or you're trying to figure out, should we spend the money,
Mhm.
to fly to some places or whatnot, at minimum, virtual tours.
Yes.
So, demonstrating some interest at schools in this digital age, I'm telling students at least a digital footprint. You
Yep.
should be able to touch each campus that you're applying to, but that's part of the research process. So that's probably the most time consuming.
Yes.
So I put that in the front.
Mhm.
um, I think with that, a second item is, organizing the process and, starting to become clear on deadlines. Once you have 3 or 4 schools that you feel pretty sure, about 80% sure you'll apply to,
Yeah.
making sure that you're setting up some sort of spreadsheet. And this is a great tool where parents can help,
Mm.
organizing the process, which you can look at any college's admissions page and they'll say required items to apply. And they give you a step-by-step process. And it's
Love it.
slightly different at schools, but there's a standard, you
Mhm.
know, um, setting up a spreadsheet, because what really different, the big difference are deadlines,
Right.
application platforms, just things that you don't want to sneak up later. If you
Yes.
want smaller schools, do they have an interview? Um,
Yes.
so setting up that organizational document, I think I always say it's the tool that helps parents sleep at night, so that in October they're not
Yes.
waking up the student at 2 in the morning. Did you submit this? I see the deadline's coming. So um, preparing for senior discussions with their guidance counselor.
Mm.
So I have another rising senior this year, and he just received a message through the parent portal at the school saying, parent student portal saying, sign up for the senior Google Classroom. And that's
Wow.
very common. So many things, are not going to come home by paper. Everything's going to be communicated from the high school. So understanding your school's process, super important. And one of the things I never hear from parents, and I always encourage, is go to your high school's website,
Mhm.
parent, student, and look at what it says that your school's process is. So they're going to have a parent-student meeting for seniors in the fall to review this. But looking ahead, you're
Yeah.
just going to feel less stress. Come the end of August and school's going back and, "Oh, I don't know what I don't know." Well, it's actually on your school's website, almost guaranteed. And some are extremely thorough,
Right.
and some start in ninth grade. And they will
Ooh.
mystify. So for anybody who's a younger listener and parent of a new school community, for instance, and they want to know, well, what do they do to help us at the school? I would look on the school's website. Um, Standardized testing, that's part of that checklist.
Yes.
Is it needed? Have you done them? And, if you're not a strong tester and none of your schools require them, maybe you're off the hook. You know, if
Cross that item off the checklist. That's always fun to
Totally.
do.
But that's why that organizational spreadsheet is your best friend, quite honestly, because it is most schools are test optional still, but you'd hate to be called out. You'd
Yeah.
also, hate to miss out on an opportunity where maybe your test scores would add, some perspective. They tend to be helpful if they're the stronger scores, you know. So, understanding those pieces. And if, like we were talking about teacher recs, if you haven't asked for teacher recommendations, though your teachers may not be checking email, I know I always did as a teacher. And so I wasn't on it all the time, but blissfully in the summer. But I love a heads up, from a student if they haven't asked me already for a rec
Yeah.
and they're going to the first day of school rather than having a line out the door. I'd love to have a heads up on an email and
Yes.
kind of get it, even if they don't hear back from the teacher, you put it in the ether, to say, I'm working on my applications this summer and I wonder if you'd write me a letter of rec. Um, and then a big one I was thinking about is, looking at the school calendar as a family and really trying to harness the days that you have a school holiday.
Ah,
So I
yes.
find Catholic high schools, not so many fall holidays before
Mhm.
November
Right.
1. So that's where maybe some of those summer, days would be spent visiting or plan for some weekend visits and or when you're going to get your application work done.
Yeah.
Making sure it's the summer and the weekends, not during the school days. I think school
Yeah.
days are jam-packed, so don't anticipate you're getting application work done.
Right.
But that would be helpful. And then public school students tend to have quite a few holidays.
Mhm.
Many working parents, can tell you. So,
You sure
um,
do.
that tend to be great times to visit campuses.
Yeah.
So being, looking ahead 3 months at the school calendar to see when could we maybe do, some visits or open houses or things like that. And that applies for rising juniors as well for sure, looking at that school calendar because you might want to squeeze in a couple of school visits.
Very smart. Any other tips for the rising juniors now?
Yeah. And the final thing I should say about the
Oh,
seniors is
sorry.
get started on that application
Yes.
essay work. And we have great, within our podcast and our company blog, we have a ton of tips for essay writing for sure.
Perfect. And
Yeah.
we're recording it the week before, but this episode comes out on August 1st, which is
Perfect.
big day in the college admissions world,
Big
Kara.
day, Common App rollover. Woo!
Perfect. So by the time you're hearing this, you can really dig into that application and get started. And
For
actually,
sure.
next week, we're going to do a segment on the Common App rollover. So if you don't know what we're talking about, tune in next
Stay
week.
tuned. Yes. Exciting
Perfect.
days. Yeah.
And so I'm sorry. So for the juniors,
Juniors. I think the biggest thing is mapping out standardized testing. So, our advice for every student is to err on the side of having one standardized test
Mhm.
at minimum. Sometimes, most students will probably take either SAT or ACT twice during the junior year,
Mhm.
typically. A lot of athletes, if you're a three-sport athlete or even, one or two sport athlete, your school days are jam-packed and it's not the time to be piling test prep on top of
Mhm.
your regular classwork. So being preemptive and preparing the summer before for any, athletes can be especially helpful. Any just generally busy students during the school year. Um, but that being said, you know, when you take the standardized testing is the more important thing is, again, looking at the calendar. Is there a lighter part of your
Mhm.
activity list, for instance, that when you look at the school year, maybe you're not, you're really busy in the fall with Model UN or a fall play or a fall sport, but then in the middle of the school year, it gets a little bit lighter. And so therefore, maybe you've got more math under your belt and you're more academically mature. So mapping out what works, this is where focusing on your student. Yeah, there might be some students who are super advanced in math and they, are ready to take it the summer before 11th grade. My experience is developmentally, that's not true for the majority of students.
Right.
And so really paying attention to advice either from the guidance counselor and or really thinking my student right now, my son, I'd love to get everything done early,
Right.
have him check all I know what the boxes are, but developmentally speaking,
Yeah.
felt like he was gonna come into his best. He's a late birthday, all of those pieces, so didn't take it until the spring of junior year, and
Mhm.
that's, contrary to the feeling of, "I wanna get it done." I
Yeah.
think it was a good choice,
Yeah.
overall, and then it leaves you open to, other options to reveal wiggle room elsewhere. So, planning out the standardized testing for the school year and
Mhm.
having a set understanding so it doesn't just pop up,
Yes.
overall is a really, good goal, and if you're gonna do any test prep, talking with getting advice
Mhm.
from either the school or family friends of older students, for, test prep would be suggested. Yeah,
Perfect. And then
yeah.
how about for the real underclassmen, freshmen, sophomores? Do they need to be thinking about anything about the college admissions process yet?
I mean, their big focus, really is, ninth graders having a strong year, just transitioning into their new
Yeah.
school. But I say for every student, ninth grade for sure, find 2 activities 2 to 3, overall
Mhm.
that you're committing to, whether they're in school, outside of school, but may not be the same things you did in middle school and, prior. You might
Yeah.
be switching sports, you might be dropping sports, you might be, getting involved in all the many more clubs that are available to you and
Mhm.
sort of testing the waters a little bit. That's what ninth grade's meant for,
Yeah.
but really trying to commit to not just, I just go to school and I come home and that's all I can handle. You can handle more than that typically in ninth grade. That's not
Yeah.
your toughest curriculum, but it teaches time management, for sure. So trying to
Right.
find some anchor points, places that you feel comfortable and make some friends and really,
Yeah.
connect with your school or outside of school, really key, really key.
Right.
And that continues in 10th grade, but by 10th grade, trying to figure out maybe what are the 2 that maybe you'll commit to for junior
Mm.
and senior year and stay consistent with is a good goal.
I love that. So freshman year is a time to explore, try some different things, new things you haven't done before, and see if that you like them.
Totally.
In which case, those can be the few that you commit to on an ongoing basis. And if you don't
Mhm.
like something, let it go, right? And don't
Yeah,
worry about it. Don't worry about quitting an activity freshman year. That's not
yes.
going to doom your college
This
applications, is
is
it?
exactly right, exactly right. Yeah, but hitting the ground running and just knowing that, you know how to advocate for yourself, you know how to, you're doing well academically, you're communicating if you're not, those are the things that later on,
Yeah.
you're building a foundation. You're building upon that foundation from ninth grade.
I I really love that point and wouldn't have thought of it, but I think as you say it, like now's a good time to let your babies go a little bit and let them advocate for themselves. Whereas in, elementary or sometimes in middle
Yeah.
school, you're stepping in more.
Mhm.
Maybe
I think
now
you're
is the
still
time.
stepping in ninth and
Yeah.
10th,
Yeah.
for sure, but you're still, like you said, it's like I always say it's kind of like you're starting to create guardrails instead of being in the driver's seat, and just,
Yes. Oh,
you
that's a
know,
great analogy.
encourage, encouraging them to go to extra help, because then they're
Yes.
going to start figuring out what questions they need to ask. You're not going to extra help with them, overall. And, doing that instead of just maybe defaulting for a tutor, if that's, what the student's preference would be, teaching them to touch base with a teacher first,
Yes.
partly because the teacher gives them the grade. And so
Right.
therefore, but most importantly, they're building that skill of asking for help. And that is essential. If they're going to
That's
fly the coop, in any capacity, even if it's just ordering meals at a local deli, those are good skills, even in ninth grade,
100%. Yes,
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I think asking for help is, some of us are still working on that in our 40s
absolutely.
and 50s, but it is an
Yep.
awesome skill to develop.
Yep.
That's all the time. We're totally out of time, Kara. So thank you so much for
My
joining us.
pleasure.
You've been super helpful. Sending you lots of love
Thank
as you
you.
launch your first baby out there into the
Thank you.
world. We'll be thinking about you.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Shannon.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. If we didn't get to your question today, keep tuning in. We will keep working through our list of questions. And feel free to submit any new questions that pop up through our social media channels, our website, getintocollege.com. You can also email us at gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll take a review. We love getting your feedback. And definitely join us next week when we are going to be talking about, as I mentioned, how to roll over your Common App account. We're also going to be talking about how to make the most of your high school's college planning software. So I'd love to learn about that. And then also how to pay for college when interest rates are relatively high. Kara is hiding. So that'll be a great one to tune in for. So tune in, please, next week. Remember, we are here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on the Voice America Variety Network. And of course, anytime on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.